Well, thank you for joining us. This is Congressman Kevin McCarthy. I have a very special guest with us. This is Speaker Newt Gingrich is with us today.
Yeah. Great to be here, and here in the Visitor Center of the U.S. Capitol, which is filled with people, and we invite all of you to come and see your nation's capital and see the U.S. Congress. It's the center of freedom in the world, and this is just a great place to have a conversation with the majority leader.
And the reason we picked it, this is Emancipation Hall. You think about the individuals that actually built this Capitol. You think this is the visitor center, this is where the public comes. And as everybody knows, the House is closest to the people. And what I think one of the best things you did when you became Speaker, you opened this place up more. Not only just to the public, but the transparency, the whole contract with America, what it allowed to have happen here, and we try to continue to foster that and make that happen. We want everybody to be able to see government while we're working, and they're working too, walking all through.
Well, and I want to congratulate you because with your leadership as the majority leader, just if you take the issue of opioids, the number of bills you've passed, the amount of resources you've put in have been very responsive to where the country is and what we need to do.
Well, that's a very good point, because to me, opioids is breaking the fiber of this nation. There'll be more than 170 people will die today because of addiction. 112 of those is because of opioids. Now, we just put $4 billion in. We spent 2 weeks on this on the floor, more than 50 bills dealing with this challenge. Because the thing that you find with these opioid epidemic, it's really some of our best and brightest. It's that star athlete that got hurt and had a surgery and got addicted, or that police officer that got hurt in training or in an arrest, and they had a surgery and then they became addicted. They need that help to get back up, and that's what we're trying to make sure.
Right.
And we're trying to stop fentanyl from coming into this nation, which is so deadly.
And an encouraging example of innovation, the National Institutes of Health are working on non-addictive painkillers. So we can literally replace all of the opioids by having a painkiller that's effective, but that doesn't make you addicted.
That's what we need. You know, you go from an aspirin to an opioid. We need something in between
That's
there,
right.
which is so key. And that's really, one last thing before we get into all the questions. You know, we just had a debate on the floor here where there's some people who wanted to abolish ICE. Do you know the tons of drugs that they are able to eliminate? And a lot of that is fentanyl. And a lot of the gangs they stop is MS-13 that are bringing that into our community. But who would have thought that people would want to abolish ICE or vote present, and 133 Democrats voted present that day?
You know, there's something wrong with the whole mindset that thinks that the world is benign and that if you had no borders, everything would work perfectly. Fact is, there are millions of people who would come here if there were no borders. The drug cartels would love it if there were no borders, and we would be a much more dangerous country. I don't think the people who get involved in this kind of talk have visited enough places that don't work.
Exactly.
You know, you go to a Venezuela, you go to Syria, you go to a variety of places where you realize how much more difficult and dangerous life is. And then you look at the U.S., and frankly, the fact that we are a country, that we do have laws, that we have brave people like the officers in ICE who are willing to risk their lives to protect this country, it makes all the difference in the world.
You know, 6 of those officers gave the ultimate price, lost their life over protecting us in America, and that's what's key as we go through. But I want to talk a little bit about something that you've always focused on, the idea of technology, having technology make government closer to the people, having the data to give it greater efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability, and kind of get your view on that and ways that we can transform government to make it more accountable by using technology.
Well, one of the things I was proudest of when I first became Speaker was that we were able, the day after I was sworn in, we were able to put online what was then called the Thomas system, which is now the House Information System. Bill Thomas always thought it was named for him.
He did.
It was actually named for Thomas Jefferson, but that was not. But one of the great moments, and you'll appreciate this having led the conference, was when we introduced the tax cuts in '95. Congressman Bill Archer, who had been there a long time, would never have dreamed he'd be doing this. Got up and actually read into the record how you could locate this brand new tax bill online so you could download it yourself at home. And I thought, that was a real revolution. And of course, you've done more of that. And I think one of the answers to all the talk about the deep state and all the talk about corruption is honesty and transparency and accountability. and then people can make their own mind up. And that's why I've advocated, for example, that the president should go through and declassify certain documents so that people can see the whole document. I mean, a lot of this stuff...
You want trust. You want people to come back and have trust.
And as Reagan used to say, quoting an old Russian proverb, you trust but verify. People will trust things that they can see. They won't trust things that they're told to trust. And of course, you represent an institution which is at the center of freedom, and an institution which, every dollar spent by the U.S. goes through this building. All of the laws go through this building. People deserve the right to have that kind of information and that kind of access. And I think with all the different breakthroughs we're getting with the internet and with YouTube and with other things, well, like what we're doing today.
Exactly.
The very fact you can have a program on Facebook tells you that you can make available at zero cost. You don't have to hire a lobbyist, don't have to join a political party, don't have to make a contribution. And you can be right in the middle of things, seeing things. And of course, you do it every day here when committees have hearings and C-SPAN is there. And I think the future is to those willing to be accountable and transparent and out in the open.
I think it's the best way. So we've moved 2 different bills that became law. One is the modernization, because government spends $80 billion on technology. But the one thing that we found, 80% of that is legacy, back to a floppy disk and others. I mean, and when I sit back and look at people want to walk out and get a cab, they can look at their phone, get an Uber, know when it's coming, what's the car, they can rate the driver, pay, but then I look at a veteran who's trying to simply get an appointment at a VA, has to sit and hold maybe months on end. Use that technology where that veteran can not only set an appointment right then, rate the doctor, have the medical records there. You've got transparency, you've got accountability, you won't have overbilling in the process as well.
Right.
But what's most importantly, that veteran will get treated better. And then so what I also did was called the Talent Act, because we need some of the best and brightest to help us in government. I really believe that. And why can't somebody who's successful in technology come back and give 2 years to government to help us get to this point faster? Because they're doing it in the business community. Help us see it and make it even move to a place that we haven't been before.
Sure, and a good example of that is this whole issue about cybercrime and being hacked in. Today, we still have the Cyber Command under traditional civil service bureaucratic rules. You got to get the best people in the country, and they may only come for 3 years.
Yes.
So they're not going to come here and spend 25 or 30 years to get a pension. And we're going to have to rethink all the way we staff things in order to be able to attract the smartest, most experienced, most competent people. That's a real revolution in government.
We have to flip it on its head. We've got to make it more accountable and more open, and I think that's what technology can do for us. One place that I know you've always looked at, space today is different, and we're coming on our 50th anniversary of Apollo, but what the space can do for us today, other people can go to space, not just government. Providing the satellites could give us greater security. We can also lower the price of our cell phones and everything else about it. And we moved the Space Act that encouraged more people to space, protected, and we're also, something that people don't know, we made private property. So if you go to space and you want to find minerals and others, we'll give you the private property to do it.
Well, it's really fascinating. You come from a state, when you look at Southern California, you look at SpaceX, with Elon Musk, for example. There are 3 graduates from the University of Southern California who are in the late 20s who just built the largest 3D printer in the world and actually printed a rocket engine which works. As you look at this stuff, all of these things are coming down the road. And of course, what both Jeff Bezos at Amazon and Elon Musk have done at SpaceX is they are building rockets that are reusable. Yes. They go up and they come back down. And I think they're going to dramatically reduce the cost of going into space. I keep telling young people, you're right at the edge of a frontier that is no longer going to be a handful of astronauts exploring. It's going to be thousands of Americans who are pioneers and they're colonists, and whether it's the asteroids or it's the moon or it's Mars, in the next 10 years we're going to see dramatic breakthroughs.
We're going to lose so much more. The Juno project up into Jupiter now, seeing what we're finding. But the thing that happens too, we had in the past been purchasing all these engines from Russia. We were having to pay Russia to go up to the space station. by having others and private entities in and building, as you say, that new engine, made in America, what this president talks about, reusable, so the cost is coming down, and the ability, if you're able to travel faster, because as you get that arc of the Earth, going to Australia would even be quicker. I mean, they are really going to see transformation they haven't seen in decades.
Yeah, I fully expect that my grandchildren, who are now 16 and 18, will be able in their lifetime to get to, say, Australia from Washington in under 4 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
the world will become smaller.
Yeah, and they're going to equally have a chance to go and work on asteroids. There's a great article about the country of Luxembourg, which is a really tiny country, but it has the largest, after the United States, it has the largest investments in working on asteroids in the world. It has some 200 companies now headquartered there, because it's a country which used to be a coal and steel mining country, and now it's saying, okay, we want to be in the next wave of mining, and they think that's going to be in space.
We see a lot of that coming forward. Now, you are a historian. You write many books. You taught political science before you even came here. There is a difference that's happening, not just in America, but around the world. And kind of the contrast of the parties, the contrast of what we're seeing. I mean, we've seen real change just in the last 18 months in this new presidency. But you look at some of the numbers of growth. For our challenges that are out there, growth really matters. But think about it for one moment. In the last 49 years in this country, unemployment has only been below 4% 7 months in 49 years. And 2 of those 7 months were April and May of this year. So if you're a young person, really the opportunity is greater. But what do you see for government itself and the parties themselves going forward?
Well, I think part of what you see all over the world is that people are now fed up with large bureaucracies that don't deliver. And so there's a dramatic populist move in Europe and in the United States, parts of Latin America, of people saying, look, we can do better. I mean, you have an iPhone which allows you to take pictures that are amazing.
And it has more technology than Apollo had,
That's
just
exactly
in that phone.
Right. And you go down the list of all the things. So you have instant microwave, you have instant on television, and then you get to government. And I think the pressures to accelerate and to change the system are going to continue to grow. I also think we're right at the edge. The policies which you helped pass, I remember working with you on the tax cut.
Yeah.
That policy is now proven beyond any reasonable doubt. We have the lowest black unemployment in history. We have the lowest Latino unemployment in history. There's a pretty good chance that we're going to see the economic growth rate be well above 4% in the second quarter.
Did you ever think that was possible?
Well, I did, but that's because I used to work with Reagan, and I remember under Carter, none of this was possible, and then Reagan came along, and then Obama made it impossible, and then Trump came along.
Now when you were Speaker, but if you look at the growth years under Obama, you take his highest year, it's still lower than the worst year under Bill Clinton when you were back in power.
Yeah, and that's because we reformed welfare, we cut taxes, we cut regulations. In
works.
many ways, it was the precursor to what you guys have been doing. And the fact is, it's working. And I think what we really have to focus on communicating with the American people is we have a model that fails. It's called socialism. If you'd like to be in Venezuela, go visit. You'll understand that it literally is collapsing as a country.
Inflation up to almost 1,000,000% or something?
Yeah, it's just crazy. And we have a model that works. And it's free enterprise. It's you as a consumer having choices. It's a chance of a small business getting opened up. And we need to double down on getting even more accelerated growth so people can have better savings accounts, better retirements, so that they have a chance for a better job. And at the same time, we have to apply those principles to healthcare so we begin to bring down the cost of healthcare just as we have accelerated the economy in general. And I think we could have a decade that is extraordinary.
You bring up healthcare, and it's interesting. In this Congress, just like with tax, we were able to give the longest extension to the children's health chip, 10 years reauthorization. Unfortunately, Democrats voted no. They fought us in the process. But we're going to repeal the medical device tax this week. We funded opioids by $4 billion. And then in the Wall Street Journal today, they talk about, for the first time in 6 years, private insurance, the number of people that have it, have grown by 2%. It hasn't gone up in that amount of time, but because the economy is going so well, it actually helps healthcare too for the number of people who have it. And then we're expanding HSA, something that you champion in, And one thing most people don't realize, there are more people with a health savings account than on Obamacare. Almost twice as many.
Yeah. Well, and I think as we make it better and better, more people are going to get a health savings account because it gives them control of spending their money. It gives them a better range of choices. And it gives them a security that in a crisis, they've got the money already sitting there, earning interest and growing, so that it can be available for them to meet any of their health needs.
Let's talk a little bit, because you are a historian of pretty much history in its making. Have you seen, though, from a standpoint, when you think about security, North Korea sitting down with America, and you look at the satellite photos today where Kim is actually dismantling some of his facilities, much what he told President Trump he would do?
Well, I think this whole thing's amazing because President Trump adopted a policy of being extraordinarily tough. I mean, I remember when President Clinton's Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, danced with Kim Il-sung, the father of the current dictator. I don't think the Koreans were very impressed. And I think part of what happened is that the president got very tough, both verbally, talking about Rocket Man, and in terms of sanctions. Organized the Chinese and the South Koreans and the Japanese, has now recruited the Russians to join the project, began to really squeeze North Korea. And when they met, they have a very interesting good guy, bad guy. Trump is really nice.
Yeah.
Pompeo, who graduated first in his class at West Point, is really not nice.
Yeah, he's tough.
And apparently when Pompeo visited recently, they were very offended by what he said to them. And I think it's because he sort of reverted to being the head of the Corps of Cadets and said, look, you mess with us, it is going to be really miserable. And we are paying attention, and we're not stupid. And we're going to make this, we're going to break your economy. And so they were, I think, really offended that he told them the truth, because they thought we were going to be like a traditional Republican or Democrat administration that said, oh, we'll get along with you.
Yeah.
You make us feel good. I'm optimistic that again, I think Reagan's phrase, trust but verify, is important. We'll see how it evolves, but it is, in all fairness, they've now had 3 different major facilities that they're taking down. And I think we also have probably surprised both them and the Russians with our intelligence capabilities and the fact that we really can monitor this stuff at a level that they didn't think possible.
Well, let's touch one thing I want to go back into as we look for the future. We got economic growth, but one of the elements of economic growth is regulation. And one of the scariest parts that I found, a lot of regulation doesn't come from here, but comes from those agencies.
That's right.
So the people don't have a vote on it. But I did a little study that, so if an agency proposes a new regulation, and they'll score it, meaning what does it cost business? If it reaches 100 million, it's called a major ruling. You realize we averaged 82 a year for the last 5 years in the last administration? But with this new administration, they've cut more regulation than all the other presidencies. It's faster than anyone has been able to do it. And I think that has really given a shot in the arm for that entrepreneur, and now with the tax cut done at the same time, people are willing to make that investment.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. The fact is that the deregulatory effort of the first year was already improving the economy before the tax cut.
Yes.
And then the tax cut kicked in as sort of stage 2. And frankly, if they then index capital gains so that you don't pay for inflation, you're going to get a third part of the rocket takeoff of this thing. But I think also you make a key point, which is you're elected. I mean, you are responsible to the people. Some bureaucrat who's been sitting over here for 35 years, nobody knows who they are, but they can have enormous power.
And when have they ever been back in the community and listened to people?
That's right. And so they can sit up here and make some rule which destroys a small town in California or destroys an industry in Wyoming, and they have no notion of the damage they're doing. And I think in that sense, all of the effort we're undertaking now to get control of the regulatory process is a major step back towards genuine freedom and back towards putting the people in charge.
And what I'm really worried about, we're now getting people who have been out of the workforce back into the workforce. We got 600,000 re-enter, and I think some more welfare reform, helping those individuals get back in. This week, Career Technical is coming back from the Senate just last night. We're going to send that to the President to be signed, because what we're finding in that 21st century, we've got to educate differently. We've got to train differently for this new workforce to compete around the world.
That's right, and we have to recognize that all of us may get retrained 3 or 4 or 5 times in our lifetime. That the old model that you went to school once in your life and then you lived off that knowledge the rest of your life is just gone. And so having better vocational education, having better job-related education, having things that are more flexible, I think are all very, very important. And I frankly like the proposal by the President that we blend together the Department of Labor and the Department of Education and get a really work-oriented learning system so that every American of every ethnic background has a real shot at getting a better job.
One of the last things I want to touch on is something you worked with me on, which I thank you for, reforming the VA. How we treat our veterans says a lot about who we are as a country. And going into the healthcare system and allowing people to get out of the system if they want to, go locally within the choice. But also, one thing that we've done in this new administration, the GI Bill, which was tremendous. How many people have gone to school on that? You only had 15 years to use it or you lost it. Now you have a lifetime. And the other thing, I put this amendment in to open it up, something you just talked about. You ever heard of Udacity?
Yes.
You're going to train? Do you know the GI Bill, you couldn't go to Udacity? And here's Udacity, where you've got these thousands of veterans coming back where she or he wants to go. They could be trained, go to work for Facebook and others in just 9 months. I mean, Sebastian, who created it, he taught at Stanford. He opened that up for free, whoever wanted it, and he found the people online did better than the people in class. But the part I love most about Udacity, Judy and I, our son was going to Georgetown, but I saw I was paying for Udacity too. He was paying $200 a month. When he finished the course, he got half back. You get a nano degree. If you don't have a job in 6 months, you get 100% of your tuition back. What will that do to higher education?
I think that the challenge that Sebastian Thrun has developed at Udacity is one of the revolutionary changes, the kind of innovation that is going to change everything. And I look at places around the country. Mitch Daniel, he used to be governor of...
I was just with him this weekend.
Yeah. As you know, Mitch now at Purdue has just done revolutionary things. He's not raised tuition $1 in 4 years.
And expanded the number of engineers.
Yeah, and that's the kind of change that's coming. And he also has absorbed into Purdue an online learning system that allows distance education all around the world.
You got to do it. See, I believe we're living through the 4th industrial revolution, and none of us ever lived through it. And what happens in this, you get displacement. You should not fear that, but we should have a government that's open, can adapt to it, have the transparency to train the next workforce, because it's going to transform with the self-driving car, self-driving truck. You're going to have a different generation coming forward on the jobs that are needed there. But we have to be prepared for it. That's why our investment in science, NIH, building a stronger economy, and I'll tell you, I was with the president and went to Davos. After we passed the tax bill, I was sitting around with the other leaders. You know the number one thing they said they were going to do? That they were going to pass a tax bill now. I asked them what their impression of Washington and America. He says, you're back, because you're back to doing big things. And we credit a lot with you, because you made Washington open, think bigger, and plan for the future. And that's what we're trying to do now.
Look, I'm with you. I think that our children and our grandchildren are going to have an extraordinarily exciting adventure. I think that we're just at the beginning of scales of change that are going to allow us to live longer, live healthier, have greater choices of what we do, and enable us to keep learning for our whole lifetime so we can adapt to the new opportunities and the new things coming around the world. And I think what you've done here in the House is a key part of that, because we have to keep modernizing our laws and we have to keep modernizing our government if we're going to have the rate of change we want and enable America to be the most prosperous country in the world.
You know, one thing I've taken from you, you got to measure yourself too. So Quorum is this company just deals with data, some young smart kids out of Harvard. I measure Congress, and I measure the bills that get out of committee, because it's important you go through committee, that's where the expertise. The bills that pass the floor, the bills that become law, and bipartisanship. Do you know this is the most productive House of Representatives in modern history? It is the most bipartisan on bills when it goes through that become law in the last 25 years. So we're continuing to measure ourselves. We have a lot more improvement to go. But I thank you for coming back to the People's House to open it up at the Visitor Center.
Great fun. Thank you.
And I thank you for joining us, and we'll continue to do more Facebook Live with thought provokers throughout this country that way to make this country even stronger, more efficient, more accountable for all of you.